Now, just wanted to touch on pacing for watts, split, and miles per hour. Now, I put it in that order because that seems to be the most common occurrence as far as when we change our monitors. As far as pacing goes for watts, we know that in our coaching notes that we see, for instance, push watts being about 25 to 50 over base, all outs being 50 plus over whatever your base is. And that works really well. It really does. The issue, what is someone's base watts? What is their base watts? Coach, what should I be at? That, if someone asks you that, that is like someone asking you, how fast should I be running for my base? We're all different. We're all different. And especially with rowing being so much favored based off of body size, you cannot tell someone what base watts to do. They have to use their monitors. And this is where we need to really, really use our tech to our advantage. Because with base, especially when it comes to the warm-up, what I found really, really helps, rowers, as we strap in, let's continue to add pressure per stroke, watching our top right watts increase until you see your heart rate hit blue. Once you hit blue, I want you to hold that top right number just like you would holding your treadmill base. And I want you to hold it there for the next 2.5 minutes. And by the end, they'll be in green. It is incorrect, in my opinion, to say row until you get to green and that's your base watts. Because that can be anything. You know, they could take 20 strokes, all of a sudden get to green, be at 300 watts. Like that's not just the right terminology. Like it's not a more consistent terminology. But if you can tell them, let's add pressure per stroke until we hit blue and then hold that top right number. And if it takes you to green, that's your base. Then that's a more appropriate base for people. So that's how I would encourage it to be coached during the warm-up. And that helps people get familiar with their rowing monitor, which is something that they need to be checking in with. Too often, remember his eyes just wandering around the room. You need to know how fast you're going because on the rowing machine, you have to make your speed. On the treadmill, you just have to not fly off, right? You just hold your pace. As long as you don't fly off, your heart rate will go up, it'll get to where it needs to be. But there's a little bit more accountability on the rower. For instance, on a block of like, okay, we're gonna do minute push, minute base, minute push, minute base, kind of like how it was today. Have them push and say, let's make this push feel like it does on the treadmills. And then as soon as you transition to base, rowers, you know how on the treadmill, when we hit base, we know that it's not a rest and recovery. We know that there is still a little bit of effort that it takes to hold base. We need to find that effort here on the rower. We need to still keep pressure per stroke, but let's try to keep those watts no more or no less than 50 below what you just pushed at. So that way you've translated it more into a general sense without having them specifically know. And then if they can't hold within 50, like if they're dropping way lower than that, then we know that they push too hard. But they'll tend to learn that over time too. If like on the mic we go back to a push, all right, rowers, let's try to get those watts 25 to 50 above what you were just holding at base. And if we can reiterate that often enough, those that really want to learn and figure it out, they will pick up on that and they'll learn to adjust themselves from there. But when in doubt, numbers aside, it needs to feel like it does up there. And we know, and I think especially like calling out a base on a rower after a push, we know it doesn't feel like a recovery when we go from push to base on the treadmill. So let's make sure we're adding pressure per stroke still. We still have a bit of a press. Try not to take it off. Those are some words that I like to throw around. So that's really good. That's a really, really good question. So I would say just kind of honing in on that on the warm-up though. Over time, it becomes a little more natural to say and helping to encourage members too to start at different stations. I know a lot of members never start on the rowers. Like, you know, I think if we can get a lot of people more people to start on the rowers, they'll get that more experience of learning that and use it more. So yeah, that's how I would coach watts, coach watts. Split is of course a little different. We know that split time, it's measuring, it's like a fitness watch. If your pace per mile, if you're running outside, it's telling you your pace per mile. If you start running faster, your pace per mile goes down. Same thing on the rower, it's just showing your pace for every 500 meters. That's how I try to explain it to members, because when you say split, if they're not a swimmer or a high school athlete, they're not gonna know what a split is. And so instead of calling it a split, I call it a pace timer, showing you your pace, showing you at that intensity, you will finish 500 meters at that time. When coaching it, our coaching notes say push between 5 and 10 or so splits below base. You would want to coach them to a base split, just like how you would with watts. Keep working on adding pressure per stroke until you see your heart rate hit blue. Try to hold that number. Now, the reason why we use split, which is the reason why the whole rowing world uses split, is because it's not as variable as watts or as something like calories per hour. It's not as consistent, let's say, as like miles per hour, which is unique to WaterRower, which we will touch on. But it's a good opportunity for members. The reason why we set it on like those endurance days, for instance, is because it doesn't change as often as watts does. You know, if you're rowing and it's saying 140, 137, 142, if it was set to split, it would show 208, 208, maybe 207, 208. Like, it's much more consistent of a variable. But articulating to members, letting them know that rowing harder means that the split will go lower. Just something to articulate maybe in the lobby intro or whatever row they're doing. Rowers, we're set to split time today. The harder you row, the lower that top right number will be. Now, when it comes to miles per hour, this is the coolest thing about WaterRower, in my opinion. The fact that we have a miles per hour like setting is super cool, and as far as I know, it's the only rowing machine that has it unique to that. We can use that very easily translatable to the treadmills. When someone's rowing and we're having them row to their base, and the day is set for miles per hour, between 1 and 3 miles per hour of what you would do on the treadmills for the joggers and runners. For power walkers, obviously it's going to be a little bit different because power walking could be based off of a fitness level thing, it could be based off of an injury thing, whatever it might be. But hey, joggers and runners, right now, that miles per hour for our base, let's try to get that 1, 2, or 3 miles per hour above what you would do on the treadmills. Giving that range is going to also help people adjust based off of their skill level, based off of what they're capable of. The people that are really good at their form, they get the lean in the swing, they get the lat engagement at the front end. Like, they are going to be 3 miles per hour or more over their base compared to a treadmill. But someone who struggles to deal with a lot more of these conceptual topics that we've talked about, they're gonna be closer to what they would do on a treadmill. But what's cool though is if we're going into a push row or an all-out row, we can move into those just like we would on the treadmills. If we're going into a push, 1 to 2 miles per hour over base. How is that achieved though? That's the question, and that's where we're gonna move on to stroke rate.